everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Sometimes we get into these topics that might seem kind of like we're going full-on nerd mode, but trust me, this one's actually super relevant to, everyone. Today we're going to be tackling the difference between power and energy.
Yeah, these two terms, people toss them around all the time, almost like they're the same thing.
Exactly, but they're not.
Not at all. More like related, but definitely not identical twins.
More like cousins, maybe.
Cousins, yeah, that's a good way to put it. And the thing is, understanding the difference between these two, power and energy.
Right.
I mean, it can actually really help you understand all sorts of things about the tech we use every single day, how we use energy in our homes, even your energy bill.
For sure. And look, we get it. It might sound a little dry at first, but honestly, once you wrap your head around the distinction, you start to see it everywhere.
Literally everywhere. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah, and our goal today is to break it all down for you. Make it crystal clear why this matters, like from your phone charging on your desk to, I don't know, your washing machine chugging away in the basement.
Absolutely. And to help make it all make sense, we're going to use some real-world examples that everyone can relate to. Remember those camping trips where you'd fire up the propane stove to make, I don't know, some instant ramen or something?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Or even simpler, just think about the last time you zapped some leftovers in the microwave. We're going to use stuff like that to explain power and energy. So, ready to dive in?
Let's do it.
Okay, let's start with that camping stove example. So, picture this, right? You've got your propane tank all hooked up, ready to go.
All right, got it.
Now, that propane itself, the actual liquid stuff inside the tank, that represents your total stored energy. It's like potential energy just waiting to be released.
Like a battery full of, I don't know, heat-making power.
Right, exactly. Now, when you crank open that valve on the stove and light it up, boom, you're releasing that stored energy as heat. But, and this is the crucial part, that little knob you turn to control the flame, that's dictating the rate at which you're burning through that propane, how quickly you're using up that stored energy. And that, my friend, is power.
Exactly. It's all about the intensity of the energy release at any given moment, like a big roaring flame. That's high power. You're burning through a lot of propane in a short burst.
Right, exactly. But now think about the total amount of, I don't know what you cooked on your camping stove, maybe perfectly toasted marshmallows.
Okay, yeah, toasted marshmallows. I like it.
The total number of those you can make, that depends on how much propane you had in the tank to begin with, the total energy, not just how high the flame was at any one time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally makes sense. It's think about driving. If you're flooring it everywhere, high power, you're guzzling gas, you're going to get to your destination faster. But the total amount of gas you're going to burn through for the whole trip, that depends on the total distance you got to cover, right? Not just how hard you are pushing the pedal at any given moment.
Perfect analogy. So to put it in a more, official way, power is like a snapshot, right? It's the instantaneous rate at which energy is being used or transferred.
Exactly. And energy. That's the big picture. The total amount of oomph needed to actually get something done, boil water for pasta, power your laptop for the afternoon, whatever.
Okay, so we've got power, it's the rate, and energy, it's the total amount. And now here's the cool part, the thing that ties those two together. Time.
Right, time.
You can't really separate those two concepts when you're talking about how much energy something uses over a period of time. And here's the key equation for all of this. Energy equals power multiplied by time. Write that one down, folks.
Super important equation. Now let's talk units, because this is usually where things start to get, I don't know, a little murky for people. So power, as we've been saying, it's a rate, and the standard unit for power is the watt.
Yeah, you see watts everywhere, on light bulbs, appliances, all over the place.
Everywhere. And 1 watt, what that actually means is that 1 joule of energy is being used, transferred, whatever, every single second.
Now, most people probably think of watts in the context of electricity, but remember our camping stove from earlier?
Yeah.
That burner pumping out 3,200 watts of heat?
Wow, that's a lot.
That's power too.
Huh?
Doesn't matter what form the energy's in, it's all about the rate of conversion. And just for fun, that's roughly 4.3 horsepower, just to give you another frame of reference.
Wow, interesting. It really shows how watts are kind of a universal unit, right? Whether you're talking about electrical stuff, heat, mechanical power, whatever. Now, energy itself is measured in joules, but for the kind of stuff we're talking about today, like everyday life stuff, joules are kind of, tiny.
Yeah, if we started talking about your home's energy use in joules, we'd be throwing around these insanely huge numbers. No one wants to deal with that. So instead, we use watt-hours, written O-W-H And kilowatt hours, kilowatt hours. You've definitely seen kilowatt hours on your energy bill.
Yeah, those are much more practical units, especially for the amount of energy that our homes and gadgets use. A watt hour is literally just what it sounds like, the amount of energy used by a 1-watt device running for 1 hour.
Simple as that. And a kilowatt hour, that's just 1,000 watt hours. So let's say you have a, I don't know, a 10-watt LED light bulb in your living room. You leave it on for 3 hours while you're reading a book or something. That bulb just used 10 watts times 3 hours, 30 watt hours of energy total.
Exactly. Easy math. And here's a really important point to remember, folks. Watt hours tells you the total amount of energy that was used. It's not watts per hour, which would be like a change in power over time, a whole different thing. Watt hours are a quantity,
Yeah.
like gallons of gas in your car.
Yeah, good point. That's a really common mix-up. And those kilowatt hours, that's primarily what you're seeing on your electricity bill each month. Your utility company isn't usually charging you for the absolute peak power you drew for like a few seconds here and there.
Right. They're charging you for the total amount of energy you consumed over that whole billing period, those kilowatt hours adding up.
And that actually brings us to something that I think trips a lot of people up, especially when they're thinking about like upgrading their kitchen. There's this idea floating around that electric cooking is gonna like totally destroy your budget because electric stoves have those big scary power ratings.
Yeah.
You see an electric stove with a max power of like 8,500 watts and you think, whoa, this thing's gonna suck down energy like crazy.
Yeah, that's a massive
Yeah.
number.
It is. It's a big number. But here's the thing. Think about how you actually cook. You're usually heating up like relatively small amounts of food for a pretty short amount of time. That 8,500 watt rating, that's assuming you had every single burner cranked up to the max and the oven blasting at the same time. When's the last time you actually did that? Probably never.
Never.
Yeah.
And even if you did have everything going full blast, like it's not going to be like that for hours on end, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Take making scrambled eggs in the morning, for example. Let's say you're using a 1,200 watt burner. It might take a minute or two to get the pan nice and hot, and then maybe 5 minutes tops to cook those eggs.
Mhm.
Even if that burner's running at full power for those 7 minutes, you're looking at 1.2 kilowatts times 760ths of an hour. That's only 0.14 kilowatt hours of energy total.
Really not much at all.
Yeah, and the actual energy used is probably even lower than that because, once your pan's heated up, you usually turn the burner down a bit.
True, true. In fact, one of the sources we were looking at for this episode, they even did some testing and found that scrambling 3 eggs only used something like 0.08 kilowatt hours.
That's tiny.
Tiny, yeah. Especially when you compare that to something like your air conditioner chugging away for hours on a hot day.
Yeah, that's a great point. Think about a 2 kilowatt air conditioner running for, I don't know, let's say 8 hours to keep your place cool. That's 16 kilowatt hours right there.
Yeah.
So yeah, your stove might be able to draw a lot more power for those brief moments when you're really cooking something, but it's the continuous energy use of things like your AC, your fridge running all the time. Those are the things that really make a difference on your monthly bill. It's that cumulative effect of using energy over longer periods that adds up.
For sure. So remember, folks, when you see those big, scary power ratings on appliances, remember to factor in how long those things are actually running at that high power. That's the key to figuring out their actual energy impact.
Now, we've talked a lot about how energy consumption is the main thing that affects your wallet when it comes to energy bills. But that doesn't mean that power levels are never important.
Yeah, absolutely. There are definitely times when that instantaneous rate of energy use, that power, really matters in your day-to-day life.
Definitely. Like, the first one that comes to mind is just plain old time. Higher power lets you get things done faster. Like, think about your microwaves.
Yes, the microwave.
If you have one of those beefy 1,200 watt models, it's going to nuke your leftovers way faster than like a wimpy 600 watt microwave. But the total amount of energy it takes to heat those leftovers up to the same temperature, it's going to be pretty similar in both cases. It just comes down to how quickly those microwaves can pump that energy into your food.
That rate, that power. Same with like electric kettles. If you've ever used one of those kettles they have in Europe, you know those things boil water crazy fast. It's because they can draw a lot more power than the ones we usually have here in the U.S.
Yeah, same hot water for your tea in the end. It just gets there a lot quicker.
Much faster energy delivery. And this difference in power becomes super important when you start thinking about bigger things, like charging an electric car. Let's say you have an electric car with a 77.4 kilowatt hour battery, which is fairly typical these days.
Okay, 77.4 kilowatt hours.
If you're plugging it into a standard home charger, like a level 2 charger that delivers around 7.5 kilowatts of power, it's going to take you probably a good 10 hours to fully charge that battery from empty. But if you roll up to one of those fancy DC fast charging stations, the kind you see popping up along highways and
Oh,
stuff,
yeah, those things are like magic.
they can pump out serious power, like 170 kilowatts or even more in some cases.
Yeah.
So you could potentially top up your battery to like 80% in, I don't know, maybe half an hour, even less, depending on the car and the charger.
Crazy fast. But it's important to remember that the total amount of energy needed to charge that battery to 80% is the same, whether you're using a slow charger or a fast charger. What changes is the rate at which that energy is flowing into the battery.
Exactly. Power is all about speed in this case. Now, another really important area where power comes into play is power limits. Every home, every building, it has a limit to how much power it can draw from the grid at any given moment. This limit is usually determined by the main breaker box, measured in amps, and you can think of it as like a bottleneck.
Yeah, it's like a maximum capacity for your entire electrical system. So there's only so much power you can use at any one time before things start to, well, break.
Exactly. You can only run so many power-hungry appliances at the same time, things like your air conditioner, your electric oven, maybe a hairdryer if it's a really powerful one, before you risk overloading the system and tripping a breaker.
It's like, trying to shove too much stuff through a doorway all at once. It just doesn't work. Now, usually, for most people in their homes, this power limit isn't something they have to think about too much. But there are some situations, kind of niche cases, where power limits can indirectly become energy limits, too.
Right, good point. Imagine you're trying to heat a really poorly insulated house in the middle of winter using electric space heaters.
Oh, I can already see where this is going, yeah.
If the rate at which your house is losing heat is faster than the rate at which those heaters can pump heat into the house, you're going to have a problem.
Basically, you're losing heat faster than you can replace it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how long you run those heaters, you're not going to be able to get the house warm enough because you've hit the power limit of your electrical system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And on a smaller scale, don't forget about those individual circuit breakers that control different parts of your house. In the US, a typical circuit for outlets is 15 amps, which means it can handle around 1,800 watts before it trips. So you can't just plug in a bunch of high-power devices into the same outlet without risking overloading that circuit.
Right. Ever tried running a space heater and a hairdryer on the same circuit at the same time?
Yeah.
You'll probably trip the breaker.
Yeah. Not a good idea.
Yeah.
Not a good idea. And then, just to mention it for folks who might be curious, there's also something called demand charges. These are basically fees based on the highest peak power that you use during a specific time period, like a billing cycle. These are more common for businesses, especially large energy users, and it kind of encourages them to spread out their energy use and avoid creating those huge spikes in demand that can strain the grid. Not as common for residential customers in most areas, but still something to be aware of as our energy systems keep evolving.
So bottom line for everyone at home, the total energy you use is usually the main thing that affects your energy bills. But those power ratings, those watts, they definitely matter when it comes to how quickly you can get stuff done and how many energy-hungry gadgets you can run all at the same time. It's all connected. Now, before we wrap up, let's touch on something that's super important for making the most of the energy you do use, energy efficiency. So we've been talking about the total energy it takes to do something, like heat up your leftovers in the microwave. But how efficiently a device uses energy to accomplish that task, that can make a big difference too.
Absolutely.
Think about lighting. Remember those old school incandescent light bulbs, the ones that got super hot? Switching from those to modern LED bulbs, that was a massive improvement in energy efficiency.
Yeah, LEDs can produce the same amount of light using way less power, which obviously saves you energy and money in the long run.
And then there's really cool tech like heat pumps, which are amazing for both heating and cooling your home. The neat thing about heat pumps, as our sources pointed out, is that they don't actually generate heat themselves, they just move it around. So they're a lot more efficient for heating your home than those old electric resistance heaters that just blast out heat.
And fun fact, your air conditioner is actually a type of heat pump, just working in reverse.
Exactly. It's all about moving heat energy from one place to another. Pretty clever stuff.
Now we can't forget about that sneaky vampire drain either, that standby power that some gadgets use, even when they're turned off. Thankfully, modern devices are a lot better at sipping power when they're in standby mode than they used to be. But still, when you think about the sheer number of devices we all have plugged in these days, those tiny little sips of energy can add up over the course of a year.
It's crazy, right? Like, One of our sources mentioned this funny example. It was about a microwave clock.
Oh, yeah, I read that one too.
If you hardly ever use your microwave to actually heat anything,
Hmm.
some people barely use their microwaves, that clock display can actually end up using more energy over time than the actual microwave itself.
Yeah, it's kind of wild when you think about it, how those small, constant power draws, they really can accumulate.
For sure. So to bring it all home for everyone listening, the big takeaway here, the thing we really want you to remember, is to try to develop what one of our sources called an energy-first mindset.
I like that. Energy first, yeah.
Instead of just looking at the power rating on a device, those watts, trying to think about how much total energy it's going to use over time
Hmm.
to do what you need it to do.
Hmm.
Think about those kilowatt hours.
Yeah, that's a much better way to think about it. It really makes you more aware of your own habits, like what you're doing during the day that's actually using up the most energy. And if
Yeah.
you really want to get into the nitty-gritty, those plug-in energy monitors you can buy online, those are really eye-opening. They show you exactly how much energy your devices are using in real time.
Really useful tools.
Yeah. And another thing, you know, always be a little skeptical of those products that promise like crazy energy savings. You see ads for these miracle gadgets all the time, but the truth is, the most effective way to lower your energy bills is usually to just make more conscious choices about how you're using your appliances, how often you're using them, that kind of stuff. It's about behavior more than anything else, usually.
For sure. And at the end of the day, understanding this relationship between power and energy, it really empowers you to make smarter decisions about all sorts of things, like what kind of tech you bring into your home, how you manage your energy use day to day, even thinking about bigger picture energy solutions for the future.
Absolutely. So next time you're, I don't know, brewing your morning coffee or charging your phone overnight,
Yeah.
maybe take a second to think about the energy that went into those tasks. Developing that kind of intuition, that energy first way of thinking, it can really change your perspective on the world around you and all the tech we rely on every single day.
It's all connected, you
Yep.
know? So think about it. What are some of the things you do in your daily routine that use energy? Maybe even consider those power limits we were talking about earlier. How much your home's electrical system can handle. It might change how you think about future upgrades or new gadgets.
Yeah, that's a great point. And on that note, that's going to do it for this deep dive into power and energy. Hopefully, this has cleared out some of the confusion around these terms.
I hope so.
Join us next time as we